Aloha from Hawaii, Dick Allgire here, and I want to talk a little bit about my thoughts on consciousness. Not only consciousness, but space and time. I've drawn a couple of waypoints so I can remember. I want to talk about DNA, I want to talk about the human brain, and the electromagnetic frequency spectrum within the greater field of consciousness. I've been a remote viewer for about 27 years now, and when you begin remote viewing the first few times, when you successfully describe, sense, see, feel, taste a target that is distant from you in space and time, it's an oh my God moment. It's like, oh my God, how did I do that? And was that a quirk? Was that an accident? Did I guess that? And then you do it a few more times and you get better and better. And eventually, if you have more than a few brain cells, you start thinking about, what does this mean? How can I do this? How is our physical reality constructed that this is possible? And science hasn't been able to explain this. Now, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a physicist, I'm not conversant in physics, so I won't be very good at explaining it that way. What I am is I'm an astronaut in consciousness, and I've gone out there many, many, many times. So I can sit at my desk here in Makiki, Hawaii, and simultaneously project a part of my awareness to, say, Roswell, New Mexico in 1947, or the Alamo back in the 1800s, or Göbekli Tepe 3,000 years ago, or one that I recently did, I can go forward in time, where I saw the ending, the dramatic ending of Super Bowl 57 a month before the teams were actually selected to play in that event. And I described it, I said the Eagles, the Philadelphia Eagles would be there, and the owner would be upset because they're going to lose in the last 10 seconds dramatically. So how's that possible? When you do it the first few times, it is astonishing, then it becomes mystifying, then it becomes thrilling, and then it becomes sometimes unsettling, because the more you do it, the more you realize that reality isn't quite constructed the way they've been teaching us throughout time. Okay, so some thoughts on consciousness. We are led to believe that we exist in a physical universe of three-dimensional universe, where we have a dimension of space which would go up this way and out both these directions, okay? So this is space, and we live in space-time. Time is said to be linear, so time progresses. We're right here right now, and each second we go a notch further in a linear fashion through time. Some believe that consciousness exists within this fundamental reality of space-time, but more and more physicists are realizing that space-time might not be fundamental to our universe. And what I'm going to postulate is that consciousness is a dimension, and consciousness is elemental, fundamental, that space and time are constructs within consciousness. So consciousness, it would be this whole board, and then, you know, not just this whole board, the whole playing field, the all, everything. Consciousness is the all, and we are inside of consciousness, and you cannot ever get outside of consciousness by definition. How can you be conscious if you're not in consciousness? So consciousness is the greater dimension, and space-time is a construct within that. So here we are, human beings. Here's my little guy that I've drawn with a brain. And what I feel is that the brain is a filter. It filters that field of consciousness. It's a filter, and it is also a transceiver. It's a transmitter and a receiver. So it transmits and receives within this greater field of consciousness. So somebody made us, using DNA. DNA is the little machine tool that can take bits of elements from our planet Earth and assemble them into this human body. This is the little replicating device. So the machine of DNA makes us and creates this brain. But what comes with the stock human being is a subconscious awareness, part of our spirit, our soul. What we are is we're eternal souls that are part of this greater field of consciousness, and some would call that God. So God is the all, the everything, the great consciousness that envelops everything. So as spiritual beings, we are a consciousness within a consciousness. And in order to have this human experience in this alleged three-dimensional reality, our consciousness is squeezed into this, it's not squeezed into, it's filtered through this brain. So we have parabolic antennas here for sound. We have stereoscopic vision devices, our eyes, and we have other sensory nerve endings that can smell and taste and feel. So those physical senses enable us to have an experience within this illusory 3D reality. And what this brain, through this DNA created interface, can perceive is, here's the EMF spectrum. We only perceive a very, very narrow band of frequencies in the EMF spectrum. And we only experience them in this very momentary nowness of the linear timeline. So what you're getting is a very filtered experience of this greater field of consciousness that is limited by a narrow EMF window and a narrow window of, quote, time, which enables us to get just enough sensory data and just enough EMF information to live a successful physical life. Now, some people, like I think crazy schizophrenics, have something that opens up, and they're just, many schizophrenics will be, I had a friend whose brother was schizophrenic. He'd say, you know, a lot of what he said, it wasn't really crazy, it made sense, but it was just overwhelming to him. You can take certain drugs that will open you up that way. Remote viewing certainly does it. Psychics are naturally tuned in to get past that filter a little bit. And so your stock consciousness is a part of this greater consciousness filtered through your brain and your five physical senses. If you've ever noticed when you go to a really good concert and you're with 20,000 other people, what happens there is that each of your individual consciousnesses within that field of that concert meld into a closed local loop of consciousness, and you have an ecstatic, profound, transcendent experience at a really good concert, because you're all feeling the same thing at the same time, and your consciousnesses all meld and become a greater consciousness. Now, at a Grateful Dead concert, you could take something that would help, but it would really happen, but I don't want to get too far into that. So we have a filter, we have a consciousness. Now this EMF thing, the electromagnetic frequencies, some would have you say that, well, it ends at 0 hertz, like that's the end, and it only goes up to like whatever frequency is the top of the spectrum. But does it really end? Probably not. It may go on, and it may go higher and higher frequencies, but we only get this little bit of a frequency. So how does remote viewing work? If we're in the here and now, and all of our attention is focused through this filter at this narrow band of frequencies, at this narrow band of time, we're experiencing the now. You've had moments in your life where you've transcended the now, where you had a premonition, where like you think of something and then it happens. You go, God, I was thinking about that. Or there's a friend that you haven't seen in 20 years, and suddenly you like think of them and like look them up on Facebook. I wonder what so-and-so's doing, and then they call you out of the blue. That just happened to me last week. I had a friend call me, and I said, I told him what I'd been doing, and he said, "Funny, you've been doing that. I'm become a 32nd degree Freemason." I said, "Wow, good for you." 33rd degree, apparently you can't ask when you're going to be made that. If you ask, you never get made it. But anyway, so you've had moments where you knew things that you shouldn't know. The mother who knows her child is in trouble, the premonition that you have, the dream you have that comes true. And that is part of this greater consciousness leaking through to your subconscious awareness, that is the field that is this filtered there. It breaks through the filters. When we remote view, everything that has ever happened and ever will happen exists in this greater field of consciousness. So if you have Roswell in 1947 that's over here, or Göbekli Tepe 3,000 years ago is over here, a really good tasker, targeteer in remote viewing can get the information about that, find a connection to that, give it a random number like C1L2-Z5Q9, and make an association, give you that C1L2-Z5Q9. What I can do as a remote viewer is establish a communication pathway between my primary awareness, this filtered brain housing group, and my bit of subconscious awareness that is in this greater field, direct it to Göbekli Tepe or direct it to the Super Bowl 57 and establish communication pathways where that is what's happening in the greater field of consciousness can be perceived by me here. And that's how it works. And the brain is a filter, and remote viewing allows you to open up a little channel within that filter so that specific information can filter through. I want to end with a soundbite from my dear friend, now passed on to the greater field of consciousness, Hitomi Akamatsu. 10 years ago, it's 11 years now, I think, 2012. Yeah, almost 12 years ago, I gave her a target that was the Hadron Particle Collider in CERN, where the moment where they found the so-called God particle. And physicists were using this particle accelerator and collider to try to determine what happens when energy coalesces into physical matter. And Hitomi did an astounding 2-day remote viewing session. And before I gave her the feedback, she had just finished a really intense ERV style session, and she was coming out of it and she was still kind of groggy. And lucky I had a camera there, because she made a very profound statement about what scientists looking to see how the God particle comes into existence, what they really should be looking at. So I'm going to end with that.
At the end of her session, before being told what the target was, Hitomi records a final thought.
Suddenly my mind was still kept going with the target, and then my mind or the thought suddenly said they should study consciousness, they should study the power of mind, otherwise they'll never get there.